Hello and welcome to Keeping It Young podcast, conversations about marriage, family, and ministry life. I'm Dave.
And I'm Bethlie.
And we are the Youngs.
Welcome back to our series in the book of Proverbs.
Absolutely. We're glad you joined us today. Thanks for joining us last week as we talked about influences. And we're going to pick up there again today. We have really enjoyed this study, though. What a great reminder. We're still raising our teenage daughter, our baby girl.
Yes.
And what a reminder. And just even being reminded of things we did and people who helped us to see these truths, how thankful I am for in ministry, as we served in ministry, how God put people in our lives through ministry to help us, to direct us, to give us wisdom. What a great blessing it is.
Absolutely. And what a burden the Lord has placed on our heart to try to share these truths from the Bible with parents these days. Because I know in any parenting situation, whether it's secular or Christian, parents are really up against it. And there is so much, can we say, misinformation out there, so much truth that's wrapped in a lie or a lie that's wrapped in truth that even Christian parents are swallowing. And so we just have such a burden to share the word of God with you, to just share practical, applicable truth.
Sure. And today's, as we're going to continue this idea of influence, today is a very important one. Because today we're going to talk about friends. And we want to remind you of the verse that we're kind of using as the foundation of this, Proverbs 13:20. He that walketh with wise men shall be
wise,
but a companion of fools shall be
destroyed.
Such a powerful truth. So powerful. And remember, it parallels Proverbs chapter 1. If you are just joining us today, you should take the time to read Proverbs chapter 1, verses 10 through 19.
Yes. My
son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. And my son, walk not in the way with them. These are such powerful truths. And Psalm 1, blessed is the man who walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, and he doesn't stand
in the seat of the scornful.
Yeah, and stand in the way of sinners, but his delight is in the law of the Lord.
Yes.
What wonderful truths found throughout God's word, that influence matters in our lives. And so if you're going to have a happy family and a happy life, happy family, what you have to do is you have to emphasize the blessings and the dangers of influence. When influence is blessed, it's phenomenal. And when influence is dangerous, it's deadly. And so we talked last week a little bit about the best influences are those that impart righteousness and wisdom. And we made the statement, this is kind of where we ended last week, that adult influences are better than peer influences, which then is a good bridge into the next statement. And that is that we must protect our children from lousy friends. Now, the Bible doesn't say a great deal about helping our children find good friends. It's almost as if that will happen if our children are righteously pursuing God. But there are a lot of warnings about wrong friends, right?
Wicked friends, foolish friends, simple friends, immoral friends, perverted friends.
Yes.
Just the warnings, especially in the book of Proverbs.
And wouldn't you say that in our children's lives, our four adult children and even our teenager, but especially in our four adult children, looking at their lives, the good friends in their life just happened. And good friends came along, and all of a sudden, here's a really good friendship.
As friendships develop, or as your child is being trained by you as the parents and learning in their own walk with God, those friendships do just happen.
Yes.
And so I know Charity was even talking about a good friend of hers just yesterday as we were traveling and how much she absolutely loves her. And I know one of the things that makes these two girls click is because both of them are growing in the Lord. Both of them have goals in mind of where the Lord's going to lead them in the future. And it just is something that makes it sweet. And they do giggle together. They laugh about stuff. They are silly together and all of that. But it's just a blessing that she can have this godly, good friendship. And this is something we want to promote in our children's lives. But as David was just saying, it's not something you have to make happen. As we were around this young lady's family and we became friends, then Charity and Emily became friends. It just has happened. They've grown up together. But you do have to protect your children from lousy friends. I was thinking as you were beginning this episode and we're talking about happy life and happy family, I can't even remember the topic or the title of this whole series, and we've been doing it forever.
Happy life and happy family.
Thank you, from the book of Proverbs. Sometimes we might think, well, our influences, do they really promote happiness or take away from happiness in our children's life? But just from experience in our children's lives, one of the things I do know is when they are being influenced for good and godliness and righteousness, they are happy kids. Mm-hmm. They're just doing right and their conscience is clear and everything's good. We also know from experience when our children are walking with fools, they are unhappy. It is hilarious how our kids can even defend maybe a friendship that they are making and say, oh, they're not as bad as you think they are. When we are warning our children, that's not a good friendship. You don't need to be hanging around them. And they're just, oh no, they're good people and their parents do this or that or whatever. And they start into their defense. But if that friendship continues and they are influenced with that child or that other friend, they are so unhappy. Our children are just miserable and they don't even see it until they take that step of obedience and say, you know what, Mom and Dad, you're right. They're not a good influence in my life. And they start walking away from that friend, parting ways. And then all of a sudden their heart is happy again and they're pursuing God again. And they're like, you know what? That was a miserable time in my life.
That's so true. And my goodness, all the lessons we can pull out of that, just that little scenario there. One is obviously that good friends do just happen. We said that, but we also invest in good friends. And we spend time with friends that we believe are good with our children. I've, along the way, even taken one of my sons and picked up a friend of theirs and taken them with me on a ministry trip. The idea there is to give them time to be together with people that we know are good influences.
Yes.
And we work at those things. It does happen by, as our kids are pursuing righteousness, it can just happen, but it's not that we're hands off. We are continually influencing and opening the door for our kids to have good friends. There's even churches that I will schedule on purpose because I know our children have friends there.
Yes.
And we will go out of our way, even maybe on a vacation or even as we're passing through, we're going to that church so that our children can be with those teenagers.
Yes.
Or whatever. And yet at the same time, we have to absolutely protect our children from the lousy friends. This is a really difficult one. Let's talk for a moment about the lousy friends. The Bible really in Proverbs refers to them as both the simple and the fool. And if I understand the word simple, it just basically means they lack wisdom. They do not have wisdom. And then the lousy, or the fool rather, is one who ridicules righteousness, makes fun of sin. Everything holy is kind of a ha-ha to them.
And there is a big difference between what the Bible would call a simple man, someone who lacks wisdom. Of course, young people are going to lack discernment and wisdom, and you as a parent are supposed to be training that. But if your child is around someone who consistently shows a lack of discernment and their parents are not trying to direct them in the way, that would be the simple friend. And then, of course, it is really obvious to pick out the foolish friend, the one who is not paying attention in church, the one who, when the preacher brings up a certain topic, they might roll their eyes and sigh, the one who will not sing during the song service, the one who will skip out of youth group and insists on playing basketball in the courtyard or whatever. Those are the foolish friends.
And lousy friends, moms and dads, hear this very, very carefully. Lousy friends can quickly undo everything you are teaching your children. And we've seen that in our home, to where a lousy friend can come along and the next thing we know, our child who we've had 13, 14, 17, 18 years of helping this kid, and the kid, our son, our daughter's on the right path. And all of a sudden, a lousy friend very quickly begins undoing everything.
Yes.
And this is important for you to understand, because there's several truths here that can help you with that. One is simply that it is better, and we wanted our kids to know this, it is better to have no friends than to have lousy friends.
Absolutely.
Do not miss that, moms and dads. Your teenager does not have to have friends. They can survive without them.
Yes.
And sometimes we feel sorry for our children. Well, they don't have any friends, and along comes Mr. Cool or Mrs. Cool. Miss Cool. And the next thing you know, we're letting our kids hang around them because we feel sorry. Well, they don't have any friends, so we want them to have some friends.
Right.
And what ends up happening is that our children, because we feel badly for their lack of friendship, we end up letting them be influenced very negatively by lousy friends.
Right. Or we let them go do something. Maybe you wouldn't let them hang with this person all the time, but these people have this great opportunity to do whatever, some big activity or whatever. And you're like, well, my kid would never have that opportunity unless they go with these people. And so we think it's okay. They're only going to be with them for 24 hours or 10 hours or whatever. But it is amazing the influence that can take place during that time and tear down a lot of the biblical teaching that you are already have in place or are trying to teach your children.
A story that you ought to know as a parent is the story of Amnon in the Old Testament. And the Bible tells a story of King David's son Amnon, and the Bible says Amnon had a friend. And his friend Jonadab was one who was a fool. And the story is so powerful. Your teenagers should especially know it, and maybe even your children. It does involve Amnon's friend setting it up to where Amnon had access to rape his half-sister.
Yes.
And so there is an element of it. You have to be careful when you're teaching that to your younger ones. But the fact is, Amnon's friendship eventually cost him his life.
Yes.
He is a vivid illustration that a wrong friend in your life can damage your purity, can damage your testimony, and can literally damage your future. And when it was all said and done, Amnon didn't even like what his friend did to him because he hated her. He didn't like her. He had this idea that, if I just could be with her in an immoral sense, man, I'll be happy and great. And what he found out was, no, I'm not happy. In fact, he turns into a bear of a guy because now he's angry, and he even makes the situation worse by handling it inappropriately and wrongly. Yeah. And in the process of it, his friend just kind of chuckled about it, apparently. Mm-hmm. Then he walked away and left him alone. I helped set all this up in your life.
Right.
And so what an illustration in the Bible there. Amnon had a friend. Look that one up. And here's remember, it's better to have no friends than to have lousy ones. But I would also say that it's important to remember that a good friend is one who does right and helps you do right. And if you're going to have, if your kids have friends in their life that boy, there's a teen that does what's right, and that teenager is helping my son or my daughter to do what's right, that is to be celebrated.
It is. And ultimately, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could teach our children to be that good friend?
Yes.
That is what we're after. We want our children to be the leader and to stand up and say, you know what, that's not the right thing. We're not going to do that. We're not going to talk about that. We're not going to be late to youth group just because we want to go hang out over here and talk about something inappropriate. You want your child to be the one that's calling out the sin or foolishness in the other children. But even if you have a child who is not naturally gifted with that leadership, you want your child to be able to at least recognize it.
Yes.
And say, okay, these aren't good people. I may not be able to lead them, but I'm going to walk away from them.
So the question then is, well, how do we protect our children from lousy friends? And here's maybe just a whole list of random things, not necessarily any divine order or not. But Beth and I would say, first of all, choose their friends. Just choose them. Provide time for your children to connect with good friends.
Yes.
That may be a matter of choosing a youth group. So you might have to make a choice about church to say, you know what, love this church, but can't go to this church because the youth group is influencing my child negatively. It might mean a choice about, school or sports. There's a ton of options there to say, where will my children find good friends? We mentioned just a moment ago, Charity's friend Emily. And that is not necessarily a friend that we looked at and said, okay, there's a friend we want Charity to have. But we also
I think we did.
Well, in a sense, but it wasn't like you and I sat down and talked about it
right.
and determined to make it happen.
That's true.
But what we did know is that her mom and dad, we love and we respect, greatly respect. We're just amazed at how their children are doing and how they are training their children.
Yes.
And what an example for us to be able to point to and say, look, it works. Training your children in this way, wow, look at these children. And they're happy, they're well-behaved, they get along, they're normal without being, foolish and idiotic. And what a lesson there. So we spent time with. We connected with.
We get with the Gellises as much as we can.
By what I mean there then, by choosing their friends, doesn't necessarily mean that you sit down and think, okay, now which person am I going to determine to make my daughter be friends with?
Right.
What we do mean, though, is that you're very involved in the process. And if there's a youth group that has phenomenal teenagers, and you're like, hey, these teens, wow, they're on fire for God. They're doing what's right. They're honoring the Lord. then that's a place to examine.
Right.
So by choosing that, we're being very practical here, not cold facts, not some cold, sterile, okay, this is who you're going to be friends with. There's your option. But a matter of working hard to, open the options for our children to have good friends,
right.
moms and dads.
So you're going to place yourself in a position of, hey, I really respect this family. We like this family. They have great teenagers. Let's get together with them and see if a friendship develops, or let's go to this church because they have some great teenagers and I want my child to have these influences, these friendships. So it's not something that you're going to make happen, because you can't make your child be friends with someone. There are personality differences and all of that to consider. But that is totally an option of making it available, making that friendship available. I'm reading a book right now, 5 Conversations You Must Have with Your Daughter, and it's a wonderful book. There are some things in there I haven't agreed with, but one of the things I love about the book is that she takes a very strong stance in, no, parents, you are responsible for your children in training them and so many things. But when she talks about the friendships, her children went to public school. But I would say any school that your child goes to, whether they are public schooled, homeschooled, and part of a co-op, or if they go to Christian school, they are going to be with other people that are influences in their life. And so she realized this, that her children were away from her for hours a day. And so she taught her children the difference between friendly. You are always friendly, because the Word of God commands us to be kind. And so you are always friendly, but there's a difference between friendly and friends. And so they had a rule at their house that this is the hangout place. If you want us to meet someone that you think is going to turn from I'm just friendly to this person, but this is a friend, then they need to come to our house first. You may not go to their house first, because we don't know anything about them, but bring them here. And as Dad and I get to know them, and you hang out here, and she made it fun at their house. It's not like, okay, you're just going to come here and sit and I'm going to stare at this guy. They had a game room for their kids. They had different things for them to do. So they would hang out with this child, get to know them, try to get to know this child's parents. And then as things progressed, then they could say, yes, this can turn into a friend, or no, we're going to just keep this one friendly. And so I thought that was just great. That's just a practical way for you get to know other people. Even if your kids go to a Christian school, there may be influences there that you don't want your child to have. Why don't you get to know that child in the safety of your home and in a fun environment, and then you can guide your child in a better way? Because there can be ways then for you to say, hey, did you notice that this isn't quite right in that child's life? And they have maybe a tendency to exaggerate the truth, or maybe a tendency to be sneaky or manipulative. And you can point that out. You can see it better as the adult, as the parent, and point it out to the child.
Absolutely right. And we got a whole nother list here, but I just want to pause here a moment and just make it clear, moms and dads, if your teenager or your son or daughter, if they are not well, I'm talking about they're not doing what they ought to be doing themselves, the answer is not to find them a good friend.
That's true.
The answer there is for you to parent them, to correct them, to discipline them, to change them, to get them on the right path.
Yes.
The answer for correcting your child is not a good friend. What we're talking about here is that you take a child that you're trying to help them be on the right path, you're protecting them and encouraging them to have good friends.
Absolutely. Because if your child's not doing right, they're certainly not going to help that good teenager to do what's right.
Right. So choose their friends. I would say when it comes to church, insist they sit with you rather than friends. I've been preaching on platforms across America now in, almost all the states, just a couple that I lack. But when your children sit with you, it helps them rather than sitting with their friends.
Right.
And so insist that. Their friends can sit with them as long as they sit with you, or they sit on the pew right in front of you. So there are options there. Never allow your teenagers to be unsupervised or alone with friends for extended periods of time. There may be hey, they're playing a video game, or it may be, they're taking a walk or something. But you want to be very careful about unsupervised friendships. Never allow that to happen. We have these standards as well. No overnight in another home. That's just a standard of ours because of the influence of porn on the internet, because of the prevalence in our day of sexual immorality. and sexual deviancy and child molestation. There are so many issues we have to be aware of in our generation. So no overnight in another home. We even have the standard of no teens alone in a car.
Right. There needs to be an adult present.
Always have to be an adult. If teens are riding in a car, we do have this standard. We do have the right to make an exception here and there.
Right. If it's an older teen, let's say they're already in college and they're going to be driving our charity somewhere, that usually can happen.
We recently made an exception where we were all going to a restaurant. We rode with the pastor and his wife, and Charity ended up riding with the pastor's kids.
True.
But we were together as far as following each other.
Right. And I do believe that Jacob was in the car.
And that is true. Our college kid was in that car as well.
He is a young adult.
And so that is correct. So, but our idea is there that teens alone in a car can become silly because they dare each other, they tease each other, they provoke each other, and accidents often occur, and things that are unwise occur when teens are alone in a car.
Yes.
We even say no teens alone on a trip, which limited the fact that there's things we can't do when it comes to sports, because teens that are going on a basketball trip or some huge trip and are staying alone in a room with just teenagers, that's a no for us.
A recipe for a really bad influence.
We would even say this is a hard one, moms and dads, so be very careful with this. But we would even say drop out of sports rather than allow teammates to influence your kids in a lousy direction. And I'm going to say that slower. Drop out of sports rather than allow teammates to influence your kids in a lousy direction.
Right.
That's a mouthful. If sports are just fun, well, then find more valuable ways to have fun.
Right.
Tennis, golf, and pickleball are very popular and can be family activities or lifelong activities. Many of our senior friends are now playing pickleball.
Yes.
And I know when I go play tennis with our kids in Milton, Florida, where we live, on the tennis court will frequently be people older than I am. Older people still play tennis, and of course, older people still golf.
Right.
And so rarely do you find people who, the big emphasis tends to be, big sports like, football and basketball and soccer and softball and baseball. Those things are wonderful sports. But if those in any way, shape, or form, the teammates are influencing your kids in a wrong direction, you have to make the drastic decision to make changes. And I would even go so far as to say, and we learned this from a friend of ours, if your child is really that great at sports, skip the team and hire a private coach to enhance that, your child's abilities and prepare them for greater than just being influenced by friends on a team.
Right.
So here's a couple of others. What's the other one there?
No teens alone in a room. We have done this. Our kids have limited access to video games. They are allowed to play, and all of that is set up in the boys' room. And so they are allowed to go in there and play, but we do insist on doors open during that time. Yes. So we can see what's going on, and foolishness is not ramping up or anything like that.
I would even go so far as to say this one too: change schools or the way you do school if necessary. Because influences are so important that we sometimes have to make great sacrifices, and we must be willing to take difficult steps. And is it a difficult step to say, you know what, my kid in this public school is headed in a very wrong direction. I am taking him out of the public school. Or my kid is in this Christian school headed in a very wrong direction because of the influence of friends.
Right.
I am changing things.
Well, or it can even be a homeschool co-op that maybe you're in, and your child is developing a friendship with someone that you just don't want them to be influenced by. It may be time for you to drop out of that co-op.
I'm going to add one more thing here, and our time will be gone. We do have to be willing to be drastic as long as we have the power to be. For some reason, this is hard for us as parents. And most parents who reach out to us for counsel regarding the influences of their children, maybe one of the biggest challenges I find is that we know what we want. Parents usually have an idea of what they want.
Right.
They don't know how to get there, but often in our culture, we want to get what we want in the easiest way possible. When your child has been influenced by a very negative peer or friend or, that type of relationship, oftentimes the only thing you can do is be drastic. And maybe we can give just a brief personal illustration here, because we had a child of ours who in the first year of college became friends with some negative influences.
Yes.
And we were concerned about it. My wife was the one who actually gave me a heads up that, hey, I met this friend and I'm not sure that I like him. And it was not one of those things that we could put a finger on and say, right here this is why this is wrong. But there were red flags. Yes. And that would be fair to say, wasn't it? Just some red flags.
I would say, and this is just the mom in me, I don't know, but if your child's friend does not want to hang around you as the parents, that is a red flag. And that was the first red flag that I had. Because most of the time when we would meet our children's college friends, our children all went to Christian college. So there was just that automatic Christian bond that you have, and our kids' friends wanted to be with us. But this one particular friend was very shy about being around us.
And our own child was shy about that friend being around us.
Yes.
And so there was red flags there. And so what we did is we started having conversations. We had warnings, we had challenges, we had questions. Our son was becoming an adult, still under our care because we were paying for his college and his car and his insurance and his phone and his food and his clothes and so forth. And so obviously this was an older situation with our college kid. But we watched this relationship continue to develop. Our son made the decision to continue this development to the point that it began to be obvious that this friend is really, really leading our son in a wrong direction, a very, very wrong direction. That friend opened the door then for some other friendships. Mm-hmm. And the next thing you know, our son not only had one friend that we were uneasy about, he had 3 or 4 or 5. Mm-hmm. And so what did we end up doing? Well, we ended up having to take some drastic steps. And one of the things we ended up doing, and the point I would say to you is we didn't force it. We treated him like an adult. We gave him a choice.
Right.
And we finally had a meeting and said, this has to change. And you don't have to change it because we can't make you. But if you're going to continue to pursue this direction, then here's going to be the ramifications of that. And we listed them. And then we said, if you're willing to end this friendship, here are the ramifications of that. And we listed those. And we asked our son to consider his steps. We're giving you 2 options here. If you're going to pursue this friendship, we're going to give these ramifications. And one of those was going to be that, okay, you don't have a car and you can't use my car. And we actually own your phone. So we'll be taking your phone. You'll be responsible for your own phone. And we will not pay your way to college. So we had just some simple, nobody was angry. These were long conversations, but we gave them in a list of details to our son and had him pray it over and give us an answer on his choice like 3 days later. Right. And he was very honest about it when our son finally came back and said, all right, I will do it your way, but I don't like it. That meant that we had some months of just, challenges where we were all working through this and there were some feelings involved. But Bethlie and I worked really hard to keep the lines of communication open, to help our son, to direct our son. And when it was all said and done, there was an honesty involved in it. It's like, I wasn't being wise there and I wasn't being correct there. Right. That's just a simple illustration, but the point I wanted to make in it was that sometimes you have to be drastic when it comes to wrong influences, and especially as long as you have the power to do it.
Right.
Would you add anything to that?
I would just say that for parents, I know just from my mama's heart, that is a difficult step to take, even though we had prayed about it. I felt that David was exercising biblical wisdom. You do have that fear in your heart. And I think this is what keeps some parents from doing this of, well, they're old enough to walk away. They could leave. And it is true that our son was old enough to make that life choice of, you know what, my friends are more important here and I'm just going to go. And we discussed that with each other and then with him, and we prayed about it, and we are so blessed that our son made right choices there and is walking with God at this point. And so parents, can I just say to you, don't allow Satan to put that fear in your heart of, well, what if they walk away? What if they don't come back and do what's right? Don't let Satan put that fear in your heart. You do what's right as a parent. You pray it through. You make sure your child knows, I love you no matter what you do. If you stay with us and you obey our rules, or you go with your friends, we will love you no matter what. And then just allow the Lord to really work in their heart.
That's so good. And unfortunately, we're out of time at a very important, or a really good place to stop here. One more week, at least, we're going to talk about influences, because we do need to just remind ourselves that the internet and social media, TikTok, movies, TV, all of that can be a very negative influence. So join us next week. We'll finish this particular little mini-series within this Happy Life, Happy Family series. Hope you have a wonderful week ahead. Hope you're thinking about this. You'll like it, share it, subscribe it. Please put into action what you're learning. And I think God will bless you for doing it. Have a great week. Remember to serve the Lord with gladness.
The Keeping It Young podcast is a Bax 5 Media production.